Q71. A data engineer and a data analyst are collaborating on a multi-layered data pipeline for a financial reporting system. The engineer manages the raw, bronze, and silver layers using Python, while the analyst handles the gold layer using SQL. The pipeline currently ingests data from a streaming source, but due to compliance restrictions and audit requirements, they must now migrate the pipeline to Delta Live tables and ensure that only batch data is processed. Which change must be made to the pipeline during this migration? A. The entire pipeline must be developed using Python only. B. The pipeline must discontinue the use of medallion-based multi-hop architecture. C. The entire pipeline must be implemented using SQL only. D. The pipeline must switch from a streaming source to a batch source. The correct answer is D. The pipeline must switch from a streaming source to a batch source. Breakdown of the options. D is correct. The compliance requirement explicitly dictates that only batch data is processed. To achieve this, the ingestion source must be updated to pull batch data rather than accepting continuous streaming data. Why the other options are incorrect. A is incorrect. Delta Live table supports both Python and SQL within the same pipeline. The engineer can continue using Python while the analyst uses SQL. B is incorrect. Multi-hop medallion architecture, bronze, silver, gold, is fully supported and recommended in Delta Live tables. C is incorrect. DLT is polyglot. There is no requirement to rewrite the Python code into SQL. Q72. A data engineer discovers an error in a daily update made to a production table and decides to use Delta Time Travel to revert the table to its state from 3 days ago. However, when attempting to restore the older version, they find that the data files are missing and cannot complete the rollback. The engineer investigates what might have caused the loss of historical data. Which action explains why the older data files are no longer available? A. Vacuum command was run on the table. B. Time travel command was run on the table. C. Delete history command was run on the table. D. Optimize command was none on the table. The correct answer is A. Vacuum command was run on the table. Why A is correct. The vacuum command permanently removes data files that are no longer referenced by a Delta table and are older than a designated retention threshold, by default, 7 days. If vacuum was executed on the table or configured with a retention period shorter than 3 days, the historical underlying files needed for time travel to that state were permanently deleted from storage, causing the rollback attempt to fail. Why the other options are incorrect. B is incorrect. There is no standalone command called time travel in Delta Lake. Time travel is a read capability, using syntax like timestamp as of or version as of, that queries older versions of a table, not a command that modifies or deletes files. C is incorrect. There is no standard delete history SQL command in Delta Lake for removing history files. Historical log entries are maintained, but file retention itself is governed by vacuum.d is incorrect. The optimize command compacts smaller files into larger ones to improve query performance, but does not immediately delete the older, uncompacted data files. Those older files remain intact for time travel until a vacuum operation cleans them up. Q73. You're designing a scalable data platform for a financial services firm using a modern DB platform architecture. To manage resources security and orchestration, you need to identify which components operate within the control plane of the architecture. Which two components function in the DB platform architecture's control plane? A. Virtual machines. B. Compute orchestration. C. Serverless compute. D. Unity catalog. The correct answer is B. Compute orchestration, and D. Unity catalog. Why B and D are correct. In the architecture of modern lakehouse platforms like Databricks, the environment is split into a control plane, managed by the platform vendor, and a data plane, where actual processing happens, typically hosted in the customer's cloud account. Compute orchestration, be the orchestration services, such as workflow/job scheduling, UI, and cluster lifecycle management, reside within the managed control plane. It sends commands to the compute resources in the data plane to provision or terminate workloads. Unity Catalog demetadata, access control policies, security configurations, and central metastores managed by Unity Catalog are hosted as multi-tenant services in a control plane. Why the other options are incorrect. A. Virtual machines run inside the customer's cloud network as part of the data plane to execute Spark code and process data locally at C. Serverless compute. While serverless compute simplifies infrastructure management by shifting cluster lifecycle execution to platform-managed compute resources, the compute execution environment itself still runs on a compute data plane rather than functioning as control plane governance/orchestration components. Q74. A data engineer has built a data ingestion pipeline using autoloader to process records from a JSON source. The pipeline does not include any type inference configuration or schema hints. After inspecting the output, the engineer observes that all columns in the target table are stored as string type, even though some fields contain only float or Boolean values. What explains why autoloader inferred all columns as string type? A. Autoloader is unable to determine the schema of the ingested data. B. JSON data is formatted as text, influencing autoloader's type inference. C. Autoloader processes only string data types during ingestion. D. Each field included at least one null value, affecting autoloader's type resolution. The correct answer is B. JSON data is formatted as text, influencing autoloader's type inference. Explanation. Why B is correct? By default, when type inference is enabled for JSON sources in autoloader without explicitly configuring settings like cloud files and for column types, Databricks infers all columns as string types. Because JSON is inherently a text-based format, autoloader defaults to treating values as strings to avoid data loss or schema mismatches caused by inconsistent data formatting across JSON files. To infer actual primitive types, e.g. Boolean, integer, double, you must set Python.option, cloud files and for column types, true. Why the other options are incorrect. A is incorrect. Autoloader is able to determine the schema and column names from the JSON payload. It simply defaults to string types for safety. When type inference settings aren't customized, C is incorrect. Autoloader natively supports all standard Spark data types, integers, floats, booleans, timestamps, structs, arrays, etc. D is incorrect. Autoloader handles null values gracefully during schema inference and does not automatically force every column to string purely due to the presence of nulls. Q75. A data engineer is designing a reporting layer and needs to persist query results using a create table AS select statement. They are evaluating whether to use Parquet or CSV as the format for the external table. To ensure better performance and schema consistency, they want to choose a format that offers a structural advantage. What is one benefit of choosing Parquet over CSV? A. Parquet files can be partitioned. B. Parquet files will become delta tables. C. Parquet files have a well-defined schema. D. Parquet files have the ability to be optimized. The correct answer is C. Parquet files have a well-defined schema. Explanation. Why C is correct. Parquet is a columnar file format that embeds schema metadata, such as data types and column names, directly within the file footer. This guarantees strong schema consistency and eliminates type ambiguity. CSV, on the other hand, is a plain text format without built-in data type metadata, requiring schema inference or explicit schema definitions upon read, which can lead to type mismatch errors. Why the other options are incorrect. A is incorrect. CSV files can also be partitioned when written to storage directories, e.g., partitioning by date or region using Spark. Partitioning is a feature of how storage layouts and table metastores organize files, not a unique feature of Parquet. That B is incorrect. Parquet files do not automatically become delta tables simply by being saved as Parquet. Delta Lake uses Parquet files under the hood along with JSON-based transaction logs, but standard Parquet files remain plain Parquet tables unless created using delta.d is incorrect. Commands like delta's optimize, e.g. compaction/ordering, apply specifically to Delta Lake tables, not standard standalone Parquet tables. Q76. A data engineer is integrating a Delta table into a production data pipeline. Before proceeding, they want to review their permissions on the table to ensure they have access to read and write operations. The engineer is exploring available interfaces in the workspace to verify their access rights. Where can the data engineer review their permissions on the table? A. Jobs. B. Dashboards. C. Catalog Explorer. D. Repos. The correct answer is C. Catalog Explorer. Explanation. Why C is correct? Catalog Explorer or Data Explorer. In Databricks provide the user interface to explore and manage governance objects like catalogs, schemas, tables, views, and volumes. Data engineers can select a table in Catalog Explorer and open the Permissions tab to review, grant, or revoke object-level privileges, such as select, modify, all privileges. Why the other options are incorrect. A is incorrect. Jobs, workflows is used to automate, schedule, and monitor data processing tasks and workflows, not for auditing Unity Catalog or Metastore data object permissions. B is incorrect. Dashboards is used to build, display, and publish visual data reports. D is incorrect. Repos, workspace Git folders, is used for version control and managing code repositories, notebooks, Python files, etc., connected to Git providers. Q77. A data engineer is building a multi-step Databricks job to automate a retail analytics pipeline. One of the tasks should only begin after a prior task completes successfully. To enforce this execution order, which condition should be set in the depends on field of the new task? A. Use the new task to substitute an earlier one in the job sequence. B. Trigger the new task only if a previous task encounters an error. C. Link the new task to another that uses same dependency libraries. D. Ensure the new task starts only after a preceding task finishes without error. The correct answer is D. Ensure the new task starts only after a preceding task finishes without error. Explanation. Why D is correct. In Databricks jobs workflows, the depends on field establishes task dependencies to define execution order. By default, setting a task dependency ensures that a child task will only execute after the parent task finishes with a status of success. Finishes without error. Why the other options are incorrect. A is incorrect. Task dependencies define sequence/execution order. They do not swap or substitute tasks. B is incorrect. Triggering a task only when a preceding task fails requires configuring run condition rules, e.g. at least one failed, whereas standard dependency sequencing defaults to waiting for successful completion. C is incorrect. Task dependencies dictate execution workflow and control flow, independent of shared library configurations. Q78. A data engineer is setting up a new Delta Live Tables pipeline and wants to ensure that the output data is stored in a persistent location outside the default workspace managed paths. To do this, they must define a configuration that controls where the pipeline writes its results. What must be specified during pipeline creation? A. Provide a key value configuration to customize pipeline behavior. B. Specify the preferred cost per DBU/hour for resource usage. C. Define a cloud storage path where the pipeline will write its output files. D. Set the destination database where the pipeline will store its output tables. The correct answer is C. Define a cloud storage path where the pipeline will write its output files. Explanation. Why C is correct. When creating a Delta Live Tables DLT pipeline, you can specify the storage location or storage path in JSON configurations. This defines a DBFS or cloud storage directory, e.g. S3 bucket, ADLS Gen 2 path, or GCS path, where all underlying data files, checkpoint information, and pipeline metadata are persistently stored outside the default workspace managed paths. Why the other options are incorrect. A is incorrect. While key value configurations can be used to pass custom parameters, setting a generic configuration option alone does not explicitly define the storage destination for persistent table files and checkpoints. B is incorrect. DBU cost is tied to cluster settings, node types, and pricing tiers. It does not determine file storage paths. D is incorrect. Specifying a target schema/database determines where table definitions are registered in the metastore/catalog, but it does not control the physical cloud storage location for persistent output files if you need them stored in a custom cloud path. Q79. A data engineer is prototyping a query that combines data from two existing tables to support a one-time analysis task. The results should be accessible only during their current session and must avoid creating any physical storage to reduce cost. What type of relational object should they use? A. Spark SQL table. B. View. C. Database. D. Temporary view. The correct answer is D. Temporary view. Explanation. Why D is correct. A temporary view, created via Create Temporary View, exists only for the duration of the current Spark session and automatically drops when the session ends. Because temporary views are purely logical queries over existing underlying data, they do not persist metadata in the metastore cross sessions, nor do they write any physical files to storage, making them ideal for lightweight, cost-effective, one-time analysis. Why the other options are incorrect. A is incorrect. Creating a Spark SQL table creates a permanent object in the metastore and typically writes physical underlying data files to cloud storage, incurring storage costs and persisting beyond the session. That B is incorrect. A standard view persists its logical definition in the database/catalog metastore cross sessions, making it available to other users in future sessions, rather than being restricted to the current session. C is incorrect. A database or schema is a top-level namespace container used to organize tables and views, not a query result object. Q80. A data engineer is preparing to integrate a Delta table into a production data pipeline. Before proceeding, they need to review their permissions on the table to ensure they have access to read and write operations. They are evaluating which interface within Databricks allows them to check these permissions. Which of the following locations can the data engineer review their permissions on the table? A. Databricks file system. B. Jobs. C. Dashboards. D. Data Explorer. The correct answer is D. Data Explorer. Explanation. Why D is correct. Data Explorer, also referred to as Catalog Explorer, is the UI within Databricks used to explore, manage, and govern data assets like catalogs, schemas, tables, and views. A data engineer can select a table in Data Explorer and view the Permissions tab to check or manage read/write privileges, such as select and modify. Why the other options are incorrect. A is incorrect. Databricks File System (DBFS) is an abstraction layer over cloud storage for files and directories, not an interface for viewing table-level access control permissions. B is incorrect. Jobs is used for scheduling, running, and orchestrating automated task workflows. C is incorrect. Dashboards is used for creating visual data reports and charts.
If this video helped you clear up some data engineering concepts today, hit that like button and subscribe to Innova 8 Hub so you never miss our daily breakdowns. It really helps the channel grow. Please do not go anywhere. Jump into the next video, and I'll see you there.